Everybody, welcome to the webinar. So again, this is Derek Wood, and this is another one of our monthly partner webinars where we aim to help provide some content and context to help you be more successful. So today we're going to be talking about how to use ransomware protection to leap from tactical to strategic services. And I have with me today Pleasant Little, founder of Shavoda Technology Group. And again, my name is Derek Wood, the Director of Channel Enablement. And well, Pleasant, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and Shavoda?
Yeah, hey, thanks, Derek. So, yeah, Shavoda is a fully functional technology services company based out of Colorado. The reason for us starting it up comes from my early career working with a lot of top Fortune 40s, energy companies across the board, and noticing that the environment was more on a reactive state, where everybody was just trying to get moving on move-add changes and not focusing on strategic deployments to better counter common problems, and being able to scale.
Great. So today we're going to have Pleasant talk to us about how and why ransomware protection is a good starting point, the value of moving from tactical into strategic services, and how you can define how your customers perceive your value to be strategic instead of tactical, why that's important, and then how Infrascale services help you do that. And then we'll end with some Q&A if we have time. So the first thing is we'll just ask, what are you currently providing? So we'll do this poll. And for those of you who aren't yet Infrascale partners, just mark down the answer as if you've become a partner and what you would end up providing to your customers if and when that happens. Okay, great. So no one's not sure, so that's easy. And it looks like we have a majority of people in both at about 33%. And we have 15% at only DR and 15% at cloud backup. So good. The other thing I want to introduce before we really get started is you're all going to be receiving an invite to Infrascale Partner Central. So this is a mobile application just for partners. And the aim was really to answer the call that our partners made, which was, we don't know what's going on, it's too hard to keep up, and we find it hard to find all the resources that you do have. So this mobile application is something that will be helpful for everyone in your organization, whether it's just accessing product sheets or different marketing content, if you want co-brandable presentations, if you want to know what's coming up as far as the next webinars, product service updates, basically everything that would be important to you to be successful with the program and stay up to date on things. This is going to make it a lot easier. So you'll be receiving an invite to this in the next 2 weeks. So we look forward to using that instead of relying on email to get you up to date. So the focus and starting point is, why start with ransomware protection? The reason is because protecting a business against ransomware is like obeying a new traffic law that gets put into law. It's not really an option. If you don't obey the traffic signs, then you're either going to get a ticket or get into an accident and experience some extreme damages. The ransomware phenomenon is just continuing to grow. So 2016, this year, or last year, there was an attack or an infection on a business every 2 minutes. This year, it's down to 40 seconds. So the frequency of attacks on businesses with ransomware, and these are actual infections, not just attacks that are identified and prevented, has increased by threefold. Of these victims, 72% are down for at least 2 days. We find that the overwhelming majority is still down for close to 3 to 4 business days. And that's important when you look at statistics like 80% of businesses down for 3 to 5 days go out of business within a year. So being down for a couple days, on the face of it may not seem like a big deal, but it's the ripple effect of downtime and how it continually negatively impacts a business once it happens is what makes the big damage about it. It's not anything about to do with the amount of ransom demanded, it's the downtime. In 2016, just over $1 billion were paid to ransoms. 2017 is estimated to be $5 billion. And this is an increase from 320 million in 2015. So we can see that the amount of ransoms paid out continues to go up, as does the damages incurred by downtime. The other problem with ransomware and how it's growing so quickly is that it's becoming a lot easier to get into this criminal market. For just a few $100s, criminals can go and buy ransomware packages and exploit kits, and then they're off to start trying to make some money in this new illegal enterprise. Some of the examples is, the exploits on the rise. Shadow Brokers was the group that stole the exploit Eternal Blue and 18 others from the NSA, and that was one of the exploits that was used by WannaCry, which was the attack in May that set the record for largest cyber attack in history. It was also used again in June by NotPetya, and they've just now announced, or in the last couple months, that they're going to start delivering exploits on a monthly basis as a subscription model. So this just means that the exploits are going to continue to get more sophisticated and more varied, and that makes your prevention and then your ability to test against these exploits that much more critical. Ransomware as a service, again, it's the idea here is you have software companies that are building ransomware products that can be sold to affiliates, resellers, distributors. So this is a screenshot of Spora, which is a Russian-born variant of ransomware. And we started seeing it spread all around the globe in February of this year, after first seeing it in late 2015, early 2016. The trends in ransomware are, one, to have a much nicer user experience, which you see with this interface, better customer service. So you'll actually get customer service surveys afterwards asking you how their customer service was as they took your money and helped you decrypt your data, which is laughable, but it's serious, and it's what we're dealing against are really professional, well-organized organizations using ransomware to turn a profit. Now, the major reasons that ransomware is working, even when businesses do have a backup or security services in place, is mostly because their IT involvement is still very much at a tactical level. So we have these 5 reasons that ransomware continues to win, and most of them have to do with focusing on tactical items and not really setting strategic goals as the IT leadership, as you should. The lone wolf myth is just misunderstanding what ransomware is all about. People think they can just keep rolling the dice and that it's not going to hit them. But understanding that these are criminal enterprises looking to make money, and how that's so contrast to what we've seen in the past of a lot of viruses and malware strictly being kind of an anarchist attack, just cause disruption for the sake of disruption. But now that there's profit involved, the attacks and the frequency and the complexity of those attacks is growing every day. Targeting businesses, a lot of people don't think that they're going to be targeted because they're not big enough, when in fact the SMB space is the most highly sought after demographic, because one, of the sheer volume of SMBs that there are out there to target, and two, because SMBs are statistically incapable of properly recovering from a major disaster. And that is seen by things like, still today in 2017, 35% of SMBs have no backup in place. And then if you look at the 65% that do have something in place, most of them are not going to have something that is prepared for ransomware. The exploits continue to become more sophisticated. A lot of these exploits, especially using phishing as the primary means of getting onto your network, means it pretty much bypasses a lot of that outer perimeter security software and service that you have. So you have to be more vigilant. You have to train the users. You have to make sure your inner perimeter security services are in place to help with intrusion identification and prevention. And then you have to really look at, we need to have a backup in the case that this gets through, because the fact of the matter is that prevention methods are always going to be a step behind the things they're trying to prevent. Outdated backups, again, not having backups that go off-site. All the major variants in ransomware today target local network backups as a primary objective, because they understand that if they can get your backups out of the question, then they can have a better success rate of collecting a ransom payment from you. So targeting local backups is not an accident. It's very purposely driven. So you have to go off-site. And then the fifth reason is, even if you are off-site and you have the backups, a lot of times it's just simply the speed of recovery. Most businesses don't have a backup or DR plan that's based on a restore time objective, or RTO. The analysis and the evaluation of it was, does it back up and does it recover? Answer yes or no. And if it's yes, then move on. But in this case, you really have to make sure that we're taking restore time objectives into consideration, because if you don't, then the downtime that you experience during the recovery may be enough to take the business out of business. The solution to all of these is strategic services. So tactical versus strategic. It's a pretty simple differentiation to make. Tactical things are a means towards a strategic goal. So anytime you bring up a tactical item, like anything that's maintenance related, fixing things, your continued monitoring, reports from your email filtering system or your application whitelisting system, showing things that you get out of the automated reports. Those are all tactical items. And if you don't tie those to a strategic goal, say an overall security grade, and report card for your customer, then your perception will be that you're a tactical service provider. You're a cost center. You're not an asset to the business. Strategic services are those that truly enable a business to grow. You eliminate distractions, reduce costs, reduce risks, and you increase productivity. And that's really the crux of moving from the break-fix model to the managed service model, is to become more strategic, because now you don't have to charge for every hour because you have a recurring subscription in place. So why go strategic? First, it's going to help differentiate you from everyone else providing IT services. It means that you're going to get more customers. It means that you're going to get better customers, right? So everyone that's ever provided IT services have customers that are very difficult to work with, say no more often than they say yes, and expose you to a lot of I told you so moments. And at the end of the relationship, you don't have a reference, you're glad that it's over. As you grow, because you're differentiating yourself, getting more customers and getting larger customers, you're going to need to attract more talent, more assistance to help the workload that you're increasing. And this is a normal part of lean business development strategy, is expand as you need. Differentiating yourself is going to help you attract more talent. Business continuity we put as a separate item, and maybe we could have just labeled this solution completeness, but specific with business continuity, when you put yourself in a position and you're seen as a tactical service provider, you're going to run into more no's because of a misunderstanding of the topic or the importance than yeses. And if you accept that situation, you're going to find that you're spending a lot of time in negative revenue activities. So being able to focus on a complete business continuity solution helps protect your reputation. It provides a better peace of mind to your customers, which is a reduction in distraction. And again, it protects your business from losing money because of reputation damages or just because of negative ROI activities. Aligning with the business's goals. So it's just a really easy principle to understand. If it's good for them, it's good for you. If it's bad for them, it's bad for you. And anything that you you recommend as a requirement. It shouldn't be a recommendation, it should be a requirement. And that's because it's bad for you if those things aren't in place. And if you can get that level of trust and understanding, you'll find that it'll be a lot easier for you to transition from that tactical Mr. Fix-It type of perception to an asset to the business that actually has this. And the important part about this is just owning the process, which we'll talk about. And then, of course, the ultimate goal of all of this is that you're going to make more money. Your services will grow as your customers grow. Again, you're going to be getting bigger customers and better customers. Your referrals should increase. As each stage, as you show the value you're delivering, owners talk to each other, and they're evangelists naturally. They're leaders, so they like to talk about successes and wins. And they'll talk about successes and wins that you're a part of if you present it in that way. You'll reduce customer churn, and you'll improve your overall margin, because again, you'll be spending less time on those revenue break-even or negative ROI type activities. So to dive into each one of these individually, we're going to start with differentiating your business. So here I put up a flow of the Agile method. Agile is used in the context of product development, business development, and software development. So Agile, the core principle is really just continuous delivery of value. So rather than starting a project on day one and you don't show the value you've delivered until day 365, you stop and you show the value and you make actual deliverables to the customer in every month or every 3 months, depending on the project. The other core principle of Agile is that you're planning to change your plan over time. Requirements change and you have to be flexible. So the flexibility of Agile is one of the most important factors. The third most critical factor of Agile is to incorporate the customer into this process. So the way that Infrascale from a product management standpoint does this is we do a quarterly review of our roadmap and what we want to accomplish, and we try to plan out, in differing levels of detail depending on how far out it is, but we try to get the next 90 days pretty nailed down with maybe a 15 to 20% variance. The following 90 days, you get it pretty well defined, and then 120 and thereafter, you can just put in ideas of what you'd like to get done, but there's still very much discussion points. And you can do the same thing with your customers in terms of their security services, their backup, their cost savings and efficiency type of things. And this would be something that is very easily taking into the managed service relationship.
Absolutely, and I know from our end with Shavoda, one of the things that we also look at are just ways to measure the progress of the customer during these quarterly reviews as well, and that allows us to identify current pain points. It allows us to identify strategies to improve their business and help things go more smoothly across the board.
Right, and one good way that I've seen some companies do this is that you create a scorecard that's very high level for your customers, because this is something that will be easy to understand, and you won't get lost in the details of what type of antivirus, what type of advanced heuristics and all that. And so you could start your evaluation with every new customer, and you should, with a scorecard of how you rate their current state of critical security components, backup and DR, efficiency and cost savings, and then VCIO type stuff. And then that immediately gives you a stake in the ground for your next quarterly review where you can show improvement. So your second quarterly review after the initial implementation, you can say, hey, so over the last 3 months, we took you from D, D, F, and D, and now you have, passing grades. You have C's for security, and now these are the areas we'd like to take you to the B at the next step over the next quarter. So in providing business continuity, this is one of the most important areas where you really have to use your expertise and the fact that they're paying you for your expertise, and not back down when you know that it can be quite damaging. For example, here on the screen I have an excerpt from a case study we done with Pervasive. Some of the Pervasive people we actually have on today's call, so thanks again for the case study. But they had one customer that for one reason or another, ended up only having a basic backup system in place. And then they had another customer that took the Infrascale disaster recovery services. Both were hit by Lockheed within about 2 weeks difference. The first customer, it ended up being somewhat of a disaster. So it was 320 man hours spent by the IT provider going through the recovery, spending time with account management, making sure that this business was going to be saved. Forget trying to bill for those 320 man hours. The manufacturer that had the proper service in place was up and running in less than an hour. So it didn't even get escalated. It was it didn't disrupt anyone's schedule. Now that is a point of service where you're going to get referrals. And that's a point of service that you can really hang your hat on in the next quarterly business review. You could say, hey, remember that we gave you a grade of moving to a B for a DR? Well, the result was that when you got hit by ransomware, you weren't completely taken out of pocket for a week, which happened with a previous customer. And if you think about this in terms of how many customers can get hit by something like ransomware or hardware failure or any of the other causes of downtime, it would be really bad for your business if you had to eat 200 man hours per recovery for half of your customers in 1 year. That's pretty much going to take out most of your margin with that customer, assuming that they stay a customer and assuming that they stay in business.
Absolutely. We run into that quite frequently ourselves there. I mean, a lot of times it's very common. You have a customer that says, when we reach out to them, we're going to harden your network, and keep your business more secure. And the customer typically says, hey, that's a little too expensive. What we do from a Shavoda perspective is start to educate the customer and really dive into the total cost of ownership, essentially, and go over, what the exposure really is and what it'll be. If they begin to, have an issue with, let's say some type of ransomware attack, just like the Lockheed analogy, this is what it can cost you over the course of doing business, and then sometimes they still kick back, and they may say, it's just still too much, and we'll assume the risk and we'll just keep moving on. And at that point for us, we really try to take a hard stand. We let our customer know that, this is the reason, that we have to be more strategic in the deployment. And they, from our perspective, it's a no-brainer. They have to do this, and we cannot walk away from just allowing them to assume so much risk.
Right, and don't be afraid to walk away from customers. Not all customers are, just because they're giving you money doesn't mean that money's profitable. Because like we saw in the example before, that one event, probably erased all the margin for the year for that customer. And we have some questions about how to turn away those exceptions where you've had a relationship for a while. We'll get to that at the end during the Q&A, but a good question. Okay, so the next step is, once you get through those first critical components, the real strategic value that you're providing is found once you are eliminating distractions, reducing costs, and improving efficiency. So one example that will show what happens when you incorporate IT into strategic business discussions is a friend of the family of mine that owned a trucking business in the States in the early 90s. He was having a discussion about some of the problems with tracking shipments and managing storage, and there was a large percentage of error in knowing how many units were actually shipped and delivered and accepted, and the logistics behind shipping is quite complicated, as you might imagine. Well, one of the guys in the storeroom was kind of a hobbyist tech, and he said, you know, I could work on a database that could make this a lot simpler, and we could automate a lot of this tracking and reporting so that we don't have to spend so much time doing these evaluations every month or every quarter, and it'll decrease the percentage error we have in what shipments arrived and didn't. So because there was a flat structure and IT was in a direct conversation with the strategic business type of discussion, they ended up being one of the first trucking companies in the nation to incorporate software into their shipping metrics and logistic operations plan. This led them to landing a major retailer. I think actually they're the largest retailer in the world. And then on that one account, that leapfrogged them into getting purchased a few years later by Maersk, which is a shipping company that controls 18% of all shipments globally. So that was an exceptional example of the difference in how you can enable a business to grow by just incorporating IT expertise into business discussions. But it's a stepping stone process. It doesn't happen overnight. So what we did is we kind of put together what Shavoda uses as kind of a way to roadmap your customers into these services, because not everyone is going to take these at once.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the first things that we do is focus on security, and the understanding that that's a layered approach. Looking at it from the physical layer to data, network, and all the way up to the application side. So we make sure to get the backup, disaster, and recovery in there. And from there, we have our basic reviews with our customers. And we have our tweaks, as their review process goes from quarter to quarter. Then we can start discussing our cost savings and efficiencies, over time. The ultimate goal for us is obviously securing and helping our customers become more strategic in their deployments. And essentially, from our perspective, is becoming the virtual CIO for the business, where we're writing up their technology plans, and doing the quarterly and yearly reviews and analysis.
Right. Yeah, and there's the old mantra, what's broke, don't fix what's not broken. But that's the opposite of what technology has done in the world and how it's revolutionized how we do business. So if you're just providing maintenance level services, you're just providing tactical things that anyone can do, and it gets to the point where using a technology expert to progress your business is a critical component of you progressing and differentiating yourself. And this is something that you can take with the businesses. Some will understand it better than others. So some may want that in the early part of it. They say, oh, absolutely, we absolutely need a CIO. Everyone's using their own tools, there's no management of it, etc. But with this type of a flow, this is a nice digestible addition of more value over time with the customers. What we did here is I took the service plans that Shavoda has, and I truncated it a little bit so we could fit it into the slide, but this is generally what you're looking at, and I've highlighted in red the requirements for all Shavoda customers, and you'll see that this actually gives us a nice bucket system in which we can create a report card. So you have your critical security services, grade A through F, efficiency and cost savings, A through F, VCIO, A through F. And then you can use the components of these as ways to say, okay, we want to add this component in the next quarter or the next month or the next two quarters, and that'll jump you from a B to an A. And having a consistent grading system and easy to digest separation of services without getting into the the different types of AV you can have is really helpful when you're talking to people who aren't in technology. They're business managers.
Yeah, absolutely. From our perspective, as an IT provider, we just like to tie in and incorporate Infrascale, especially the DR and backup, from the get-go. That's one of the main strategies is to make sure that we have disaster recovery, a backup solution, and being able to secure their inner and outer perimeter from the initial phase of our deployment.
So just to kind of tie it all back, and to kind of bring it into the context of disaster recovery, I like to think of, the different points of relationship you have with a customer, even before they're paying you, as the points where you can start adding more strategic value. For the most part, what I see is a lot of companies, they get stuck when they switch to a subscription plan, but the only additional value they've added are really kind of tactical monitoring services. It's like, okay, you're providing a disaster recovery service and you're monitoring to make sure that it's working, but you're missing the critical component, which is the strategic re-evaluation against new threats and proposals of where you can improve or save money. And in technology, there's in anywhere, there's always room for improvement. So, and that takes us right into why Infrascale. So, and why Infrascale services provide a terrific jumping point to start with, strategic disaster recovery services and move into those other buckets. So first, the major components are that you can protect mixed environments. A lot of service providers have a hard time, or companies have a hard time, because they have, some old databases running still on, Windows 7 or Windows XP, God forbid. And then you have virtual and physical environments. You need a solution that can cover all that. You also need the ability to protect from data loss and from downtime. And we provide both options with our offsite cloud backup for data loss at points where you have maybe remote workers. And then you can eliminate downtime by having a really nice recovery environment that's always available when you need it, where you need it. And that's how you can cloud boot with our DR service. And all of that kind of wraps into ransomware protection, which is the newest threat to enter the DR market in 30 years. In fact, it's the only thing to be added into your DR plan in the last 30 years. And that's why this is a leading topic once again. Also, when you're partnering with Infrascale, you're partnering with not just a self-proclaimed leader and deliverer of cloud awesomeness, but Gartner has repeatedly awarded us. So in 2015, we just got the participation award. You're like, okay, they're interesting, but that's it. They're interesting. 2016, we made it to being a leading visionary in the space. In 2017, we are now a leader in the disaster recovery as a service market. And that's significant because the only other people in our neighborhood are IBM and SunGard. And if you're familiar with those services, you're looking at minimum $250,000 a year to get what they have. And even what they have, the major difference is that we don't have I-Series support yet, but when it comes to recovery speed, it's pretty comparable. The other companies that we've been competing with in the market actually moved in the opposite direction this year. So in 2016, we were all much closer together in the visionary area. We were the only ones to move into the leader space, and everyone else moved down to the left from where they were the previous year. So that means that with Infrascale, you're not just partnering up with somebody who's doing a good job, but you're partnering up with somebody who is identified as a major leader in the space, and that's in two-part. One, because of what we're already delivering, and two, because of what our vision is and where we plan on taking the services. The other thing that Gartner has is another critical capabilities report, which unfortunately we don't have the distribution rights for, but you can get the main report from the Partner Resource Center. But what they did is they actually separate the rankings by customer environment. So the low complexity environment, less than 75 machines, and with their RTO and RPO targets, we were number 1. Medium complexity, which is 75 to 150, we were number 2, and it was real close. Small enterprise, and this doesn't take cost into effect, this is just function. Small enterprise and mid enterprise, we dropped to number 6, but only because we don't have I-Series support. And these RTOs and RPOs here are 12 hours, and we have a much faster RTO for every environment than what's listed as their requirements, which was a part of it. One of the main services and features that we recently released that can really go into helping you break that strategic barrier is drag and drop orchestration. So what drag and drop orchestration does is it assists you in reducing the speed and or reducing the time it takes to recover a full environment, and reduces the error inherent in having so many things to do. So when you go through a full site recovery, there are going to be a lot of dependencies between the machines, of course. Almost 99% of the time, these dependencies aren't going to be documented. A good part of the time, there are going to be dependencies that were in configurations that were done by the previous technician that are kind of in a junky way. So you always hear the conversation, whenever a new tech's involved, whoever did this before was, a moron. Pretty standard operation. But the reason is because it's not documented, and there are a lot of different ways to do the same thing. So there's complexity in each step. So once you get the domain controller set up, then you can start plugging in your primary servers. And then you're going to have some configuration options to make sure they're all working nicely together. And then you can start plugging in your tertiary servers, like your file server and your web server. Once these are all configured and verified, then you can start plugging in some additional users, and you might do that in groups and in batches so that you don't have a major issue flare up and you've just set everyone on fire for the next 2 hours. That's a lot of steps and a lot of time. With boot orchestration, with Infrascale, you can actually document the groups of the machines that you like to boot and in which order, and you can put in pauses in between those groups so that you have time for those configuration changes and verifications. So when you come into this, you need to do a test recovery, let's say against ransomware. You want to do a test recovery of recovering a full environment and restoring uptime for the business in the case that all the users' machines and all the servers are encrypted and locked up, and the local backups have been eliminated. You come in here, you hit the run button, you go grab a coffee, and you come back, and in about 20 minutes or so, the whole environment's going to be up and running. And that's because, again, it's our cloud, and we control the scalability of it, which is theoretically unlimited. What this does for your services is it takes what used to be a very high-cost, high-benefit service. It could take $5,000 worth of man hours to do a full site recovery, and that part of that may or may not include getting a recovery environment together. And because of that, it's something that really just falls under kind of the CYA bucket. You do it because you know you have to, but it's not something you can sell. Sometimes you have to charge people, but it's not that margin rich. It's really just covering your costs. When you have disaster recovery as a service with boot orchestration, you've significantly reduced your cost while keeping the same benefit, which means now you have a strategic valuable service you can start promoting. So backup testing, again, doesn't get a lot of promotion because it's kind of a pain, and no one wants to work over the weekend and get very little money for it. But now you have something that is easy to do and allows you to provide more strategic analysis and next steps from. So again, the impact to manage disaster recovery services is that you can now start in a very cost-effective manner doing regular tests that you weren't capable of doing before and providing that value.
Absolutely. I think the recovery time is what really gravitated Shavoda to Infrascale. It's a complete game changer. If we can get our customers up and be able to include that in our value propositions with the customer, that they can have recovery within an hour or so, as opposed to within a day or two. It changes the entire landscape of that organization.
Yeah, and it gives you a much faster response to new threats. A new type of ransomware comes out, and one of the business stakeholders gets, sees an article and then asks you about it, and now this is a distraction. So how do you eliminate that distraction? With a traditional system, it would be mostly talk, because it would be really expensive to go into a full test recovery, and maybe you have to do that. Um, but it's also a painful conversation to have your customer pay for what they're already paying for, right? So they're already paying for a backup service. Why pay to verify that it works? In this case, you wouldn't have to have that painful conversation. You could very quickly schedule a new test recovery to be done and report, and you could have that sent over within a day or two. And it wouldn't be something that would sideline someone for the weekend or for the week. It becomes a very easy way to eliminate the distraction of worry and provide that peace of mind. So with that, that'll finish us up for today. So again, my name is Derek Wood, Director of Channel Engagement. If you haven't already spoken with me about help in generating some leads, or just some consultation on how to package your services, and you just want to have a chat, feel free to reach out. You can find me on LinkedIn, or just use my email address here on the screen. You get in contact with me, or contact your PSM and let them know that you're interested as well. All right, so we have some questions. First question, which I think is a good one. I'm going to paraphrase it a little bit, and then I'm going to let Pleasant answer. So the question is along the lines of, everyone's has those customers that you have, kind of an emotional, friendly connection with, and they're too small to afford. Maybe it's a 1 or 2 man shop professional service. How do you handle switching those types of customers over to a more strategic model? And what have you guys found that works, and what do you do in the past?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's always a difficult one to address at certain points of time. But I think what we do the best is going into the meeting already having the plan, right? Already letting our customers know that our goal is not just to be a reactive deployment or a reactive solution for them, but to have that proactiveness or the strategicness on helping them scale. So, with that, it kind of just goes back to our prior conversation. We look at where they currently are at, and we build a plan to where they would like to go, in so many words.
Yeah, and a lot of times, breakups don't have to be bad. With those customers, if you have that relationship where you're feeling guilty for turning them away, you should have the relationship where you can just be quite frank, and you should with everyone anyways, to just say, look, it's not just about you, right? Because even if you say you assume the risk, it still is a risk that we're taking on, because we're going to be the ones you call when that bad thing happens, and we're not going to have the right things in place to really help you. And we just don't want to be in that position. We can't afford it. So we can help you find, we can continue these basic services for the next 3 months or so, but you're going to need to find somebody else that will work with you like that, but we just can't. It's just not what we want to do. And they're tough conversations to have sometimes, but again, not all customers are good customers, and not all money is profitable.
Absolutely, because the big thing is you do not want to open the customer, or like from our perspective, we don't want to open up our business to known risk. And if you can articulate that, sometimes it is a fight, sometimes it is a battle, but articulate them that you have their best interest at mind, and you're going to do what's right for them. And sometimes that is walking away from the deal.
I have a question that I think is more for me, but you can ask Pleasant what they use. Do you have any documentation that helps evaluate and grade, in this report card system you mentioned? So I don't actually have something like that, but that may be what I put together. So some of you that I've worked with have received from me a DR evaluation workbook. And this workbook I intend to make available to everyone. So if you'd like to see it, let me know and I can give it to you in its current draft form. But the DR evaluation sheet really just goes through and identifies in a very systematic approach what the risks are that you want to avoid and what the impact of those risks are to the business. So say, ransomware hits your business, and we focus on ransomware just because it's the newest and latest threat. But it could be hardware failure, impact the business if your hardware fails is 100%, right? Your business goes out of business, just completely down, or maybe 70% if you still have 30% of the business operating. And then you put in the likelihood of that actually occurring. And then when you multiply that together, you get a risk factor. And this is all standard, risk assessment, project management stuff that, everyone from Boeing to, any minor manufacturer would use. And the rule of thumb is anything over 10% you need to pay attention to. And then you identify the ways that you prevent that thing from happening and the prevention and the percentage reduction in risk that that prevention gets you. And then you can look at your mitigation or your reactive options, which is your backup. Now, typically when it comes to DR, you start with your backup in your DR system, your reaction, and then you build security on top of it. Because again, security, you're always fighting behind from the back foot. But if you have a good DR solution in place, if you do run into something that you weren't prepared for, at least you'll be able to get the business back up and running very quickly. Okay, I think that'll wrap it up for us today. Thanks everyone for attending, and pleasure working with you. Thank you for sharing your secrets with your competitors today.
It was a pleasure. I really appreciate it, Derek. You guys are awesome.
All right, everybody. Thanks. And if you have any additional questions, feel free to follow up with your PSM or me or both, and we'll be happy to do what we can to help you out or brainstorm on some changes that you're thinking of making. Thanks, and see you next month.